You're listening to the Navigating Magic podcast. This is the portal where we illuminate ways to weave ancient wisdom with modern knowledge in order to help ground your experience in this lifetime. I'm your host, Natasha Andreo, and I'm so grateful that you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. I have a very special guest with us today with a very unique topic that I genuinely feel needs more of a plug in this world. I welcome Megha Joshi to our space today, who is a grief and connection coach. Thank you so much, Megha, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Natasha. It's an honor and pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Now, the reason that I was just so intrigued with your concept, your page to begin with, let alone having you here, is because I genuinely feel like the topic of grief is often a topic that is, whether it be considered taboo or something that's hush hush or something that we don't often speak about. However, we need to make it more open and more approachable for people to, I guess, unpack this topic.
Oh, absolutely. I think we live in a world and society where no one wants to actually talk about like the harder things just because we're not taught how to deal with it. And we think that if we don't talk about it or put it under the rug, it's fine. Like we just don't have to deal with it. But it always comes back around. And I think with any of the harder emotions, it always comes like it just keeps on building up and until like it's about to explode, and then it just like shows up in the form of like health, either like health crisis or excuse me, or like mental health illnesses and things like that. And eventually what happens is like you're either diagnosed with like physical form of like illnesses, or people would just like tell you, oh, you're depressed or anxious, rather than actually looking at the underlying health issues or the trauma that we went through. um, because I think death and grief are such a big part of our human existence in general, because we are born, so we are going to die. Like it is that simple. It is as that simple. And like and we see these things in nature like on day-to-day basis. Like take trees for example. Like we're in winter here in Australia, and autumn, it's beautiful. Like the trees are change, like the leaves are changing color, and they just fall away gradually. And we don't like we see the beauty in that. Like everybody says, oh, it's so colorful, and eventually the tree is just like bare, left with like its skeleton. And then eventually spring comes around, new buds come, and life is like thriving again in summer. And we just don't seem to see it as like a cycle of life and death. And to me, this is just like fascinating that we just don't want to talk about death. We always associate death with pain, which is quite understandable, but at the same time, it is just imminent part of our existence. And I think once we start to accept this, and when this acceptance of death comes naturally to us, or slowly when we start processing that, yeah, it is okay, like it's fine, like dying is fine. And then I think the process of grieving becomes that bit easier. I would never say that it's easy. It is hard as fuck. Um, but as I say, like we don't have to deal with pain alone. We have our community, we have our people, and when we all walk through this part of life together, it becomes easier. So I think, and also like personally for me, having gone through different parts, phases of grief, has kind of like led me to see that, oh, there's actually like people not talking about it more. And there's like, we just need to talk about a lot more. And hence, yeah, this thing all came about.
Yeah. So it's so many things you touched on are so important. One big thing you mentioned was that like you obviously have experienced your own grief, and then through your own experience and trauma, you realized this isn't a topic that's often spoke about. Are you comfortable speaking about how you got into this space? Because I'm sure when you were a little girl starting kindergarten, you didn't say, I want to be a grief coach when I, grow up one day.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It is. So like sometimes I look back at my own life, like I'm like mind boggled. Because I am the big believer of like life is not a linear journey. Um, and to me, like I have a background in architecture, that's what I study, and that's what brought me to Australia from India. Um, but what like that journey and then change coming into grief and connection space has nothing but a bumpy yet beautiful journey, I would say. So the part like my grief journey started when I was 15. It was that time when I lost my mom,
Mm.
and it was a really traumatic event that happened in our family. I won't talk about it in detail, what happened, because if I talk about like my mom's death, it'll take extra another hour. And also there's a few things that I like to keep other people involved in that event, like their privacy. Um, but to put it in a way that so what my one of the family members that used to live with us, really close family member, and this person was like 8 months younger to me, so still 15 as well. And this person, just out of falling into bad company and all of those things, and mobile phones are really quite new, like with camera, and Nokia was the brand at the time. And what happened was like getting into the bad company, this person, and there was some cash sitting in the home, came across about to know about it, and then just decided to take a step that just led to my mom's death. Um, it was not intentional, but it happened. And to me, like this is obviously the step this person took was not um, no way like justified, but at the same time I like to look at it from a bigger picture, that like look at, like, for example, like TV, like it's like again like the indoctrination that happens through it. It's like it just like blows my mind, because we used to have these TV shows, and like they always show that if you hit someone on head, they just fall unconscious, and when they wake up they've got no memory of what has happened. But that's not real life. So basically, my mom ended up dying because of similar act. And as a 15-year-old, I had to witness her lying in like a pool of her own blood. Um, so that was really like traumatic for me. And sometimes like I still, and the hardest thing for me, because she was, when I found her, she was still alive. But in order to find out whether she was alive, like that was the hardest part. I think the hardest thing I've done in my life so far. So I think that was like the big part of this is like the big part of my life, why I do the work that I do. And then moving forward, of course, like no, and it kind of like shattered the whole family. And everybody just like, I think nobody wanted to talk about it, and if people talked about it, it was more sort of like, how could this person do it, and like this person should be jailed. And in India there's a law that a juvenile is not like given any jail time, so there's no legal like punishment for juvenile. It's only that they are sent to like remand homes or rehabilitation centers, but they are no good either. Actually, kids end up turning worse in there. I don't know how things are like 20 years now, but at the time it was pretty bad. Um, so that was the big turning point in my life. And then obviously, like I had to stay with different family members to just go through life, I suppose. And and then just like I think going through that phase of like figuring out like how do I do life and how do I adjust myself with other people. And even though like I knew all of them as family, there's always that part that, oh, I wish mom was here. Oh, I wish mom was here. And all like, and then I think that event kind of led into that, oh my God, like everything's just shattered, like family is no longer like a family. Um, and that's when like there's that piece of grief that you miss the actual family knew the family setting that you knew is no longer existing. Um, the family relations have changed, dynamics have changed. Then my father ended up remarrying. And at the time, like I had really good relationship with my stepmother, but things went sour with her over time. And then obviously you're like, oh, like if my mom was here, she wouldn't have done this sort of thing. So there's like those like different grief parts. And I didn't know at the time that this is like what grieving is or it looks like. But you just kind of like go along with life and then moved to Australia. And I think moving to Australia was one of the biggest part of my healing journey. I think this land has helped me heal so much, and I'm forever grateful for it. Um, and I think it was also like I just wanted to escape India because like I come from a family that is like quite orthodox in their way of thinking. I come from a small town, and my dad's side of family, like my aunties that I used to live with, like they believe in this religious sect, which is like you can't dress this way, you can't eat this, and if you're eating meat, you are a sinner. And if you're friends with a sinner, like you're a sinner as well, and all those different things. And I always like had questions around that, like why? Like can't we do this? And then they'll be like, you can't question anything, you just have to have faith. And I'm like, yeah, but still that doesn't sound right. The fact that you can't question anything. So eventually I got away from that religious sect as well. And I think then coming to Australia and finding myself again here in terms of like as a migrant. And then so that was a interesting journey as well, having to navigate those waters as an immigrant. And I I am grateful for how Australia has been for me. Like I've always been welcomed so well. And I never had to deal with any like racism or anything as such. And I personally feel like it is a reflection of our being, because that's one thing I would say, that growing up in my family, as in like mom and my dad, they never taught us that every like people are different. Um, so it's just kind of like respecting everyone, regardless of their color or whatever the background is. Excuse me. So I think that was my like journey made really smooth in that way. So, but still like, and then kind of like finding out when I started to get settled here, you live here for a long time, you find like my accent is obviously not Indian anymore. Excuse me. And oh, sorry. Um, and then obviously like I'm not, it's like finding those balance. Like if I go to India, people are like, oh, you're not Indian anymore. And in Australia, I'm like Australian, I'm not in Australian enough. So finding that balance,
Middle ground.
that really was tricky. But like I'm comfortable where I am right now. Yeah. um, so I think that's that. And then obviously during COVID, oh, that was one hectic time, as we know.
Especially in Melbourne, where you were, the strictest laws in the world.
Oh my God, it was like crazy town. And where I stood and the things I used to share so openly on my social media, I ended up losing a lot of relationships. And
Same.
quite, it was quite hard to be honest. I didn't expect to lose so many relationships on that for where like my beliefs were at, because I'm like, I'm not asking you to change your beliefs, but here's something that I believe, and maybe you should consider too. But I'm not like going against like, oh, you should be like this way, you know. But people stop talking to me, or like some people would argue with me. And I'm like, look, I'm not here to argue with anyone. This is just my point of view. But anyway, like I found that really hard to deal with at the time, but slowly I kind of like got over it. And and then I decided to move to Brisbane last year just because I was sick of cold weather. So I'm like, I need some sunshine. So I'm gonna move to Brisbane. Being like bigger city in the Queensland, I thought like it would be easier to find a job and everything. Ended up getting a job, decided to move, and it was just the fucking bumpiest move I've ever made in my life. Um, the day I was about to leave to Brisbane, like my accommodation fell through. So I was like, oh, how hard it could be to find the accommodation. I'll get an Airbnb and then I'll sort it out. But it took me a month to find the accommodation, and I was moving from Airbnb to Airbnb. My full-time job had started, so settling into that. So I'm like, this is fast. And then I think my nervous system was just like fried completely. And that's when like my grief really kicked in. And I was like, I was missing mom way too much. And like I would just constantly be thinking of her, and in ways like that hasn't happened in years. And then that actually got me to really sit down with it. And I'm like, okay, so what is going on here? And kind of like really, because I'm like, and I think always in the back of my mind, the idea of like, because last year marked 20 years of her death anniversary. So I think like that was also playing around that, oh my God, like it's been 20 years and I've lived my life like more chunk of my life without her than I have with her. So I think all of those emotional build up also played the role in it. But then I really wanted someone to talk to about this, that it's been 20 years. I felt like I've done quite a bit of work around this, but there's still like coming up, like what the fuck is going on? Um, and I could not find people I could talk to and people could relate to these things. And that's when I really thought about that, oh my God, like this thing that we need to be talking more about this. Like I do have friends who have lost their loved ones, but they are someone who don't want to talk about it. They're like, it's happened in past, it's done. Like, why would I revisit that? And I'm like, but have you really dealt with it? Like, what happens like when you miss them? And they'll be like, oh, like, I just sit with it and then that's it. Like I don't want to talk about it. It's gone, it's past, and I've just moved on. And like in my head, like it didn't make sense because I'm not like that. And for them, if they've just really let go, like great. Like I wish I could let go like that. Um, but I can't. And more people are like that, where they are still like obviously doing life without their loved ones. So then I really started digging into this, and kind of like got me into thinking that I've already done coaching, but I was never sure like what I want to do with it, or if at all I want to do anything with it. So then like the idea of like grief and connection coaching really came about. And connection more sort of like obviously talking about grief, but then connection is around like knowing ourselves, and coming back to ourselves, because our body is our biggest gift that can like keep us in the present, like keep us grounded. And that's why like, and in my journey, like obviously I've been into health and wellness since I turned 30, and I kind of realized that nobody's going to look after me like I do. So if I look after myself, I have to know myself, and I have to know my body, like where it feels good, where it doesn't feel good. So really that is the another key part of my coaching is like, yes, you experience grief, but then see where in your body you feel it, and how your body is reacting to different triggers and what comes up. And during like those significant like first few years of like one experiencing grief, it is just really like our body takes a massive toll. um and it's really about like nourishing this body, because this is what it's going to carry us forward in this life. um so just like, yeah, looking after ourselves and like eating nourishing foods, like doing whatever like works for you. Because one thing, like a lot of people ask, like, oh, you meditate, you journal, and then what can I do? And I'm like, I don't know what works for you. All I can do is I can give you the tools and the tips that I have. I'll lay it all on the table. You pick what you want to work with, and your body will guide you what it wants to work with. So I
It's
think
a
that's
unique
really
experience,
where
I
like the
think.
whole idea, because it's sort of like experimenting on myself and what has worked.
Yeah. I,
Exactly.
yeah, I think it is unique because what works for someone may not work for the other. And there's so many layers. Like everything you're saying, it just seems like there are layers and layers to peel off. But when you come back to the body, that's where the magic is.
Exactly. So, and then obviously I started reading books around like grief, and like attending um like few webinars and stuff around grief, and I came across the work of Dr. Francis Vella. His work is like really incredible. He talks about like different gates of grief. So he's literally broken down grief into five different grief. And one is like this personal grief that we experience at that personal level, which is like, for example, like in my case, like my mom passed away. The second one is like the love that our parts have not known, like the parts of ourselves that we've like become outcast. Like when we're young, we're told that you're not good enough or you're not loved enough, and all those parts that we tend to like hide away from the world. So the grief for them, like those parts that not have experienced love. And I think that is such an important part for the healing journey, because again, like if we look around like the inner child work and the um all those kind of like work, it kind of like deals with our inner child or the neglected parts when we're growing up as the children. And then he talks about the grief of the world, the collective grief, and this is like a massive monster because obviously we know what's going on in the world in different parts. um and like, for example, like take vegans for example, they do feel the grief for the earth or the animals, and like a lot of people who go vegan because of the ethical reasons, there's that grief and guilt part playing around in their grief. um so for that one, like he speaks into about like how we cannot deal with that grief by ourselves. We have to come together as community, as a collective, to deal with it, because it is such a heavy grief to deal with. um and then the fourth one is like the loss of the loved ones, or as in like the loss of the community or the village. For example, personally for me, this, now that I know this, like coming up for me is like I've got a repetitive strain injury in my wrist, and some of the doctors have told me that I might need surgery. Now, I don't want to go down the path of surgery. Obviously, if my body can heal it, like I would want my body to heal it rather than going down the path of surgery. And secondly, because they told me that if I undergo surgery, it'll be like a 3-month recovery, and they'll put me in a cast over my elbow, which means like I won't be able to do anything. It's my right hand. Now, why am I want to avoid it? Because I don't have that support system where I can lean on to others and have that, like, care, receive that care. So it is that loss of that community and that village that we obviously our ancestors had, but we don't have that. So he speaks about this, and I can't remember the fifth grade, I'm sorry. Um, and so like I'm also doing like a workshop around this, and this has been like a profound journey and breaking up like grief in different parts and seeing it from different perspectives. And the other thing I really learned in my journey is sometimes like grief is like, it's just like it's there. Like we don't want people when they're grieving, they just don't want to hear that, oh, it's going to be okay. Like, because when they're in the thick of it, like where things do not seem that it's going to be okay, um like giving advice or like telling them, like, giving them different options. Oh, you could do this or you could do this. Have you tried this? Sort of thing. I think most of the time with grief, it's just like people want it to be witnessed and that's it. No matter what it looks like for them, if they want to cry, if they want to talk it out, or if they just want to sit in silence with someone, and that's it. So I think a lot of the times we're missing the point where and because we don't know what to say, so we often end up giving advice or be like, or rather than just being honest that, hey, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. That's all. Like, I think a grieving person, that's all someone would need. So I think learning all this and then putting into practice, because these are really the things that I needed at the time, or sometimes still that's all I need. Like sometimes I'll be like, I just want to cry and I want someone to be there with me. That's it. And that way it kind of like gives me assurance that I'm just not going to be stuck in the depth of it. Um, but I'm like held by someone where I'm not going to be sinking in the depths, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that by by raising awareness about this, like about the concept of grief, that it'll help people open up more about it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when people start, because I've got so few messages, fair few messages when I started talking about it, and people like, oh my God, like you actually, like I resonate so much with what you're saying, or they'll be like, oh my God, like I didn't know that it was this normal. Um, and I was like, yes, it is normal, but just because it is heavy does like people, we've just like as a society, we haven't been taught to deal with the darkness or like the shadows of our existence. It's all like even in like the spiritual well-being community, it's all about oh love and light. Yeah, that's great. But if you don't sit with the pain and the dark side of it, um, like it is like love and light is just to a certain extent, it's all like fake because until unless like we integrate those darker parts of our existence and of our being, um, I don't think we can move forward because otherwise it will be like dragging a bag of heavy stones and heavy rocks, and you can only move so much with that.
Yeah. That was one of my questions for you, whether you think that dealing with grief at a core level, like at when you really get to unravel the many layers and atrocities, so that you get to sit with the trauma of the ordeal. And like you said, grief may not necessarily be the passing of someone; it could be the absence of something that you've never had, or something that you've been longing for but isn't here. So that, like the example with that longing for community or whatever it may be. And so like my big question is, do you think that when you deal with grief at a core level, that you can't help but lean towards your own spirituality, however that may look?
Definitely. And I think that's where like coming back to yourself and your center plays that major role because I can't answer for you like what you're longing for. All I can do is I can ask you the questions, but you are the one who has to go within yourself and find the pearls of wisdom within yourself. And it and all I can do is I can be with you and let you know that hey, I'm holding your hand here. I'm with you and assure you that you have got the answers because we all do. Like nature never creates anything without solution. It has always provided solutions to us. So, and that is it. Like if we, I can't remember, but when I was a child, I like my aunties or my grandma took me to some of like this religious chat, and one of the saints ended up saying that the root of the solution or the seed of the solution always lies in the womb of the problem. And I don't know why, like all of a sudden it just came back to me so many years later, and that is it. Um, So, and like again, like we find always like nature is always finding solution. Like after a forest, like we have, what's the word for it? When we have the bushfires. Um, after like the tragic bushfires, you go there and you start seeing the green leaves and like the little sprigs budding up. And that's it. Like it has, yeah, bushfires are tragic and the lives lost. Um, but you always see life coming back. And it's just that natural cycle.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to turn ourselves more towards nature. And that is all I do. Like I just help them see the beauty in life. Because yes, it is easy to become hopeless in this world today, especially. Um, but as like Kaylee says that like humanity wins and life is just beautiful. And we actually, I think something that I've learned over time is just feeling the genuine gratitude for life and for being alive. And once we like feel that with our whole being, it becomes easier to navigate life.
Yeah, nature is like you started off with that beautiful metaphor of the trees and their leaves, and nature is always going to give us that beautiful metaphor. And too often we become like, I think we've become so desensitized to the atrocities of life. Like I think now on social media, like it's almost become like every second story you're scrolling through, it's there's some implication relating to Gaza, like what's happening now with the war in Palestine. And whether we like it or not, we are experiencing that grief
Oh,
because it's through
absolutely.
our humanity, it's through our hearts that we are experiencing, we are feeling the atrocities and the absolute tragicness of this genocide that is happening before us. And it's something that really fires me up because, like, I just cannot get past that. In 2024, we have world leaders, we have people in power who are sitting back and doing absolutely jack about this. And so it's as a people, you go, well, okay, is this like, World War II, there was no social media. And so everything happened through the newspapers or the radio. Nowadays, we have war through our phones. We are experiencing this. And our nervous systems are taking on the brunt of this.
100%.
We know that no war will last forever. We know that, but we want this to stop because every day that this continues is just one more day this is too long. This is too much to handle.
Oh, absolutely. Like with what's going on in Gaza, it's oh, I just like I've got no words for it. Like because it's beyond that. It's beyond our humanity. Um, and the loss, as you said, like we all are feeling that grief, and it's huge. It's like a massive monster that just we just can't seem to tackle. But the fact that more and more people are speaking up about it, and the more and more people are talking about it. And one thing, obviously, past COVID, I've learned is like people have power. Um, and why? Because everybody's got that beating heart, and no matter what, at some point, that even the most, I think, inhuman person will have that seed of love within them because we are all created from love. And so, yes, it is taking longer. And there are times when I feel like, fuck, when is this going to end? Um, so, and I think that more and more people see it. That's when I think that people are feeling it eventually that, okay, this is too much. Like, this is taking my, even if this is not at my front, yet it is at my front because children, like, they are the most precious form of life that we have. Um, the pure innocence. And when we see that killed so brutally, I think that gets people. Um, and that, and if it doesn't get anyone, I just feel really sorry for them for whatever hurt that they've gone through. That they're so hardened that even this cannot get through them. And all I can do is pray for them. And may they heal from whatever hurt they've experienced in their life, or whatever condition they have been conditioned to think, eventually they'll break away from that. But yeah, I still have, and that's why I'm like really grateful for the lives of the Palestinian people, that they are sort of like, if I look at it from the spiritual perspective, like they are giving up their lives for people to wake up to this. And that just like gets me on my knees out of gratitude for those lives and for those souls. And but again, as I said, coming together as humanity for this bigger cause is, I think, what will eventually bring it to stop. But we just don't know when it's going to end, though.
Yeah. There is a higher, I guess, power at play, and only time is going to dictate, how that plays out. But two things you touch on about how when we're witnessing this, it just brings out this inner, this part of us that just can't help but feel something. And I think this is where a lot of mothers I've seen, hearing about the atrocities happening to children in the war, it's bringing out the lions or the lioness in the mothers. And then on the other hand, people who are ignorant to this, whether it's through their own, ignorance, or whether they have taught themselves how to switch off, like their heart becomes so hardened to anything that happens around them because of their own trauma. And I think it's so much easier for people these days. And I think it's very much layered with grief, that it's easier to shut off. It's easier to numb the pain. It's easier to turn to alcohol and drugs and other narcotics for that escape, because I would rather escape the problem than to deal with it, than to confront it, than to unpack it. And
Oh,
I think it's
absolutely.
easier for women to be in touch with their emotions, because like our hippocampus is actually larger than the male hippocampus
Wow.
brain, the feeling center of the brain. And you don't have to be a neuroscientist to know that women are just much more emotional. They're more in tune with their emotions at the same time. And that comes with your intuition. And I just can't help but notice, like just making observations with people, that there are some that make, like if we think talking about grief in particular, they make it all about themselves, not thinking about the implications of the other people in their lives that have also lost the person who has passed. So, for example, if it's a grieving widow losing her husband, she may forget that her children have also just lost their father.
Yeah.
Or a mother losing her son, she may also forget that, her children have lost their brother, or the husband has lost his son as well. I
That
think
is
this
like,
brings
yeah,
out our inner child.
yeah. And I think what you've touched on is so, so important. And the like two bits, like first, when we talk about like people shutting off and numbing themselves down, it's like another part of grief. It's like it comes in stages. And the first part is like denial. People just can't accept what's happening or what has just happened. And that denial can, and again, like there's no timeline, like how long it's going to last for. And I will tell you like an example of different scenario, like when I told my father about pedophilia and how bad it is, and he just did not want to like even think of the fact that an adult person can do this to a children or the child. And he was like, no, this is sick, this can't be. And I'm like, but it exists. And he was like, no, it doesn't exist. And then he just changed the topic completely because it is just too much for him to even think about. So obviously where people are at with themselves, like that's where their denial levels would be at. Um, so I think just people can't really accept the fact that it is actually a genocide for whatever reasons. Like people, for example, like a lot of Indians do support Israeli people, which is not wrong. But they are conditioned since like the partition of India and Pakistan, there has been the constant division of Hindu and Muslim. And and now when you look at like in 2024, a lot of Bollywood movies are made around like the patriotic movies and like how there's been war between India and Pakistan, or like the espionage movies, and it's like India always end up winning, and Pakistan like supports terrorism, which is not like, to me it is like, yes, they are like, they have created the space of terrorism, like they've given, and it just really actually makes me so sad to have like terrorism given the face of Islam. Like it really makes me so sad because like I have like a lot of my beautiful friends, they are Muslim. And after coming to Australia, like I've made Muslim friends from different countries. Um, so seeing them and knowing them personally, and then just like seeing that every time you speak of terrorism, oh, it's Islam, it's Muslim. Like it is just so bad. Like we are conditioned to think that way. And that's why a lot of Indians think that, oh, because Hamas is like a terrorist group, and terrorism, like terrorists should not be spared. That's it. Like no matter what the other like consequences are, they should be killed, and that's it. So that's why like when I read comments in some of the pages, like there's a lot of Indian people commenting that like there's so much like grief. Um, so that is where like I feel that, and again, I'm going back, tying it back up with that grief, that the fact that they feel that they have lost their nation or their culture or their religion to them, sort of thing. And then like, and then politicians playing, using that to their um power and their benefit, and then just like, yep, we are the ones victims here. And the same thing that's happened with the whole Gaza Israel thing, that Israel has played the victim somehow, and people want like either seeing that or wanting to see that because it's easier to see that rather than actually see the depth of pain that involves what looking at Gaza and what the Palestinians are going through. Um, so that's one part. And the second part we touched on was about losing, when someone is so self-centered in their loss. That is what like, it is exactly like a lot of things that I ask my clients as well. Like if there's a client who has lost a father figure, or like a partner, I would ask them, I was like, how was your husband's relationship with your father? Were they close? And they would be like, oh yeah. And I was like, then have you ever decided, had a chat with your husband, how he's navigating your dad's death? Because yes, he was your dad, but he was probably father figure to your husband as well. And I was like, when you have this conversation with your husband, I was like, there's something that's going to come out of it, and that will help both of you heal. And then one of my clients, like, she did have a chat with her husband, and she was like, oh my God, you were so right. Like my husband was just feeling so much loss, but just because, like, again, like as male, they're not like the condition not to show their emotions and all of that. But he just will, and then he felt like so much ease in expressing the loss that he felt. Um, so I think, yeah, people tend to really forget that the others in the family have experienced the loss in different forms. Um, and that's why talking about it is so important in the family, that yes, let's talk about it. And then celebrating the person who's died, that, oh, like, yeah, like for me, this person, like my mom, and then my dad sharing like experiences of her as a wife, or like my granddad experiencing her as her daughter-in-law. And talking about that, I think really helps heal. But in my case, like my family situation, I would say it was the other way. Like a lot of my aunties didn't speak well of her, and that kind of like really added another layer of like anger and resentment for me towards my aunties, and the fact that like I never was able to speak up for my mom, even though she'd passed away for quite a significant number of years. And it also led me to feel like I'm not good enough just because I am like my mom. Um, and that was like this whole negative, constant bombarding at me that, oh, your mom was like this, she was not capable, and this is why this happened. And then me thinking, because I look a lot like my mom as well. So I'm like, oh, probably I will make those kind of choices in my life and I might end up suffering like she did, those kind of things. So there's like obviously so many layers to this, but like if there's a healthy family dynamic, I just always encourage people to come together and celebrate the life of the person that was there.
Mm. It's interesting about like celebrating the life. Like I'm seeing more now, funerals that are not necessarily deeply religious. Like I'm finding a lot of cultures now, I'm starting to move away where, you know, in most traditions, it's like you wear black for the funeral, you wear black for the mourning period. And I've actually been to a couple funerals where the family has selected, you know, or asked people to wear either their favorite color or to wear white in celebration of their life. And it's seen as a celebration instead of a sad
Mm,
period. And I guess it depends on the death itself, because there's, you know, like in my work as an animal communicator, for instance, there's two types of clients that come to me post passing. The first type is anticipatory death,
mm,
where they're anticipating the passing of their animal, whether it be that they're sick and it could happen any day now naturally, or whether they have booked in for a euthanasia and it's only you know, a deciding date sort of
yeah,
thing. Or on the other end, which, you know, you can't say, you know, one is better than the other because they're both horrible in themselves. It's the whole the accidental death. It's like the shock, the suddenness, something has happened, an external force, and you just something that you never saw coming, which is, I guess, what you experienced as a young teenager. And each of those, you know, no matter how the passing happens, we still have to deal with it. It's like the other end of that is, okay, it's the grief that's surrounding it. And I find that, you know, in a lot of traditional cultures, like Middle Eastern cultures, a lot of Eastern cultures, it's like you said, it's taboo. We don't speak about it, or, you know, you might support the family during the mourning period, but then it's outside of that mourning period where it becomes, you know, I guess an emotional traumatic experience, and it becomes the normal lived experience at the same time. I think it was John Edwards, the renowned world psychic medium. He made a comment once. I was listening to one of his podcasts, and he mentioned that like secondary grief, where you've had the 1 year and people may message you, they may think of you, like for instance, on the person's birthday or on your birthday, like that. There's big milestone events, and then it's after that second year where people aren't necessarily going to do that. You might not get your friends, your colleagues, or certain family members even, you know, go beyond that. And that's when he says that in his work, that he finds it hits his clients the most, because that loneliness, like it can feel like a very lonely journey. Because not only are you
absolutely.
longing for the person who has passed, but now all of a sudden your support network around you is starting to crumble, and you find yourself, you're literally on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so true. Because initially people, like, while it is still so fresh, so raw, people around you would think of you and like wanting to support you and all of that. But obviously life moves on, their lives moves on, and they're not as like related to you like as in life on day-to-day basis. So obviously then like they will might not even remember the significant date. And so it's of no importance to them. And and then that's when, yeah, the person who's grieving, they realize that fuck, like I've got no one, as you said, like that loneliness, it's just really hits them because they basically they want someone to share that time with, like be it birthday or like a graduation ceremony, for example, or things like that, where you want your loved ones to be there, but they're not there. And at the same time, like other support people are not there either to tell you that, hey, like I know that, even a simple message would mean a lot, but and the thing is, like, they don't even think about it, because unless someone has experienced this, like, they just wouldn't know. And it's not like, it's not their fault. They just can't think of it that, oh, probably they're going to miss their parents, or like miss the brother or sister or whatever it is. So yes, it is very true that it is in the later years that it actually hits harder. And when I was doing this workshop, and that's when they said like that the first 5 years, or where after of the person who's experienced the loss, it is actually considered the fresh, like, grief. It's like for first 5 years, it's like quite fresh and it's raw. So the fact that our society and culture tells us to move on, it just, like, it blows my mind, because I even read up like the amount of leave like Australian government or like law provides is like 2 days of bereavement leave or compassionate leave, and I'm like, fuck off, like, honestly. And like, it just like makes me sick in my stomach, especially when I read that even like someone has had like miscarriage, even they just get like 2 days of bereavement leave. And I'm like, a woman's body cannot even recover from that miscarriage itself. Like, how would you accept that woman to be back at work after 2 days? Like, it's just, yeah, it just makes me so angry, that we need to do better as humanity, and our systems need to be better. And I think, yeah, it just probably will come after having these conversations and talking more about it.
Yeah. It's such an eye-opening topic, and I really hope that for some of the listeners, that if you know someone that is experiencing grief, whether it be fresh or years past, because we know enough that the body holds the score. Like, the body is always going to give you a response. Like, I had a client earlier this year that I was working with, and she started to notice like some body symptoms pop up. And when I dug deeper, with when you ask the right questions, you know how to hold space for your
Yeah.
clients. And through like a very specific set of questions, she was able to remember, oh, my mother's anniversary is coming up, but it wasn't something that she consciously had thought of. And
Mm,
so when we relate the symptoms in her body to what she was experiencing, like, the body remembers, okay, every year around February, you're going to remember what happened to you, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, however long ago it was, because your body is, your subconscious mind in particular, is bringing up what's held underneath. Except
exactly.
so many of us haven't been taught how to interpret the language of the subconscious mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I think it's so important to know ourselves better, and know and like witnessing what's going on in our body, because it is, like, as you said, like, it's such a big marker of, like, tells you what's going on in the body, and how it responds to not just like external factors and all of that, but like internal subconscious events that have happened. And it's like, yeah, it just fascinates me so much. And that's why the other thing I wanted to talk about quickly was like how rituals also help in overcoming the grief and like dealing with grief. And that's why a lot of cultures, like especially like the culture I come from, and even like indigenous cultures, have different rituals around grief. And I think what it does is like it allows us to move things out of us. And there are some cultures in India where they actually hire, it sounds so vague, but also kind of helps, because like they hire people during the funerals. Like, there's this women who actually come and wail at the death, even though like they have nothing to do with the person. They're literally hired to like really wail. And like, it's, some people can find it like really traumatic to see, but it is like, it's very dramatic as well, because they'll literally come and wail, let their hair loose, like they're either like going on their knees, or like, like patting their hands on their chest as well, that or someone's lost. But what it does is like watching them, like, and I think it's human connection that we have. Like when you see someone in pain and crying, you feel those emotions. And basically what it does is like it triggers those emotions in you that you may not have been able to release with the shock of the death of so it allows people to let those emotions out. And similarly, and when we talked about like community and having like people around, so in our culture, we have like the mourning period for like 13 days. And so basically like out of the first 13 days in like, so in a week, like I think there's like 3 or 4 days when people like from outside can come and visit you. And there's 3 days where it is like no visitation days, so families just by themselves. Um, but it is more like so these people actually come in to help you support and like be there with you while you're going through that mourning. A lot of the time now it's just more become like a gossip place, which is kind of like sad. Um, but initially from my interpretation now, it just looks like it was there to support the grieving people, like the grieving family. And then eventually like during like and then there are certain days where there's some of the rituals involved, which kind of like allows you to let the person go, sort of thing. So they'll literally have different rituals where at the end of like 13th day where the son or the male figure in the family will do certain things. And then you know how like Egyptians used to have the mummy and like put all the items together for the soul's departure.
Yes.
So it is similar thing where there's like a cot which is made out of like ropes and stuff, and there's other like items, like if it's a woman that's passed away, then there'll be like a sari, like some of the necklace, and like a few food items and things like that. And then like literally they get this male figure to say it out loud that, or like dear mom or dear dad or whoever's like passed away, or dear grandma, like goodbye. And it kind of like and what I've observed, because like we used to be like as kids, like they always used to take us to other funerals and stuff and like all these rituals. um and I always used to see that every time the person who was doing that ritual would just like burst into tears, because it is the hard part to say goodbye to your loved one, but having like being asked to say it out loud allows you to accept that fact that okay, this person is gone, and now I have to live with that. So
Closure.
I so that yeah, exactly, the closure that it gives you, I think it's a big part of that ritual that allows that healing and moving forward with a little bit of ease and grace. um and there's like so many other rituals that I now like talk about in the workshop as well, where they kind of like allow us to see and like like and use like different elements like fire and water to be able to help with our grief, and like having those elements actually hold us, because in Vedic culture they talk that how like earth is made of like these 5 elements, and our body is also made of the same elements. Water, like we're predominantly water, air, earth, which is the physical matter, space, and fire. So that's literally it. So kind of like having those elements around us help us um deal with our grief, and like have those elements hold our grief, support us through those the grieving rituals, and whatever that needs to come out comes out. And then we just like let fire burn it away, or let water take it away with it, and then just go down like to the mother earth, sort of things. So I think those rituals are also like important, and we need to bring more of those rituals back in our life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we have COVID to thank for that. I think COVID opened up our awareness to so many things, but coming back to our roots, coming back to our origins and a lot of customs and rituals, we found a place for them. It's like it opened our awareness to how many things that we are doing or we are being exposed to, or we are conditioned to believe or do or accept, that it's taking us away from our roots. And our ancestors did things not because they wanted to, but because it made so much sense. Like just hearing that particular ritual in your culture, it just seems so beautiful. And I just, it just saddens me to think how many, like Western cultures in particular, don't get to experience that, or don't get to have some sort of closure or some sort of ritual to mark the event, or I want to say like the finality of it, because like death and birth, they are on the same continuum. It's just
Exactly.
an amazing thing. Yeah, you're bringing awareness. So your work is very much needed in our world today.
Thank you so much. And yeah, no, I think it is like, as I said, like such an important topic to talk about. And people find it like, they're like, oh, like, let's talk about life because life is like all happy and like, people celebrate life. But I'm like, talking about death is just as important. You can think of it as like bad or dark energy, but there's nothing dark about it. It's just our perception of it that makes it
Yeah.
dark. Because as you said, like birth, life and birth, death, they're all on the same like continuum.
And it's interesting. It's a passing comment, but a few times at funerals, you bump into people, and then it's like the comment is just made, it's sad that we have to meet, in under these circumstances. But it is true now. It's like, we're too busy in our lives, the way, we're just, so caught up in whatever we're doing, that we don't socialize and we don't catch up with people in the way that, like, for instance, like our parents did when we were younger. And so nowadays, it's like someone has to get married or someone has to die for you to catch up with people, for
Yeah.
you to see them.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Like even though we're so connected in this day and age, and yet that we are so disconnected. And I think that's why it is so important. Like I literally just put my phone away sometimes because it is so easy to get trapped into the scroll hole.
Yeah, of course.
Um, and that FOMO that it creates, oh my
Yeah.
God. Um, so I
Yeah,
think that is like really important to just make time to catch up with ourselves and to catch up with others.
of course. I thank you so much for your time, Mega. This has been so delightful, so eye-opening, and just inspiring in so many ways. And I really hope that anyone listening, it gives you a sense of solace. And please do reach out to Mega. Mega, can you let everyone know where they can find you and ways that they can work with you?
Of course. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. Um, and I am on Instagram. It's the Instagram handle is at the Soulful Project. And usually I do one-on-one coaching. There's two different ways. Like either there's just like one-on-one, like one-off coaching call where you just need a support for 45 minutes, and I'm there to hold you for whatever it is that you need in that time and moment. And there's also a 6-week companionship journey that I'm with you where people like I'm just literally there as your grief companion for 6 weeks. And during those 6 weeks, whatever support you need and whatever may come up for you, like again, I'm there to hold your hand so that you are able to navigate grief as gracefully as you can, and also able to gain the wisdom out of it, which is there to show you whatever you're meant to learn through that journey and ongoing.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for this. This has been delightful.
Thank you so much, Natasha.
Wherever you're listening from, if you can give us a review and a 5-star rating, that would be so helpful in supporting this podcast. If this lights you up and inspires you in any way, then please make sure that you share this episode with others and reach out to me and let me know. I'm beyond grateful and blessed to call this work. Together, we learn, grow, and evolve. Staying anchored in your heart means staying anchored to your humanity. All my love, Natasha.